Welcome everybody who has joined this morning. My name is Nathan Winder, and I'm an English trainer for Arcanum Academy, a Munich-based language school. And of course, I come from America and the United States of America. And so today I want to talk a little bit about my home country. And I know that many of you have a lot to do with America in your work. And if not in your work, then you hear about it, America is part of everybody's life in some sense because of its size and influence around the world. So today we're going to take a look at some things that maybe you haven't seen before, and things that might give you a different perspective on the United States of America. So let's jump right in. All right. Oops. There we go. All right, so here we go. So I called this presentation, "Oh Say Can You See?" And this comes from our national anthem. And I called it this because this is a very visual presentation. There are a lot of different visual images that I want to show you to help you to better understand America, and also some of the things that deal with the language and how we speak and how we communicate. So, as I said, I come from America, and my home state is Utah, out there in the West. And the capital of Utah, also my hometown, is Salt Lake City, and that's up here in the north part of Utah. And so maybe you've heard of Utah before, maybe some of you have been there. If you've ever been to Bryce Canyon, Zion National Park, Arches, those are all in Utah, in southern Utah, down here. So a lot of people come visit California, then they come up to Las Vegas, then they see the Grand Canyon in Arizona, and then they visit these beautiful national parks in southern Utah. So that's all part of my home state. But I've lived here in Germany for almost 13 years now. So I have a lot of experience in both America and Germany, and that's helped me to see a lot of similarities and also a lot of differences. But first, I want to show you a different map of America, one that you've probably never seen before. And it's this. Here it is, the United States of America. But wait, that's not America. Right, so this is actually a really cool map. This is the United States, or the states of the United States, put into European subregions, so European states of similar population size. So you can see here, Illinois has about the same size population as Bavaria, about 12 or 13 million people. Michigan has about the same population as Saxony and Saxon-Anhalt. Minnesota is about the same as Brandenburg and Berlin. Texas has the same population roundabout as the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Utah, my home state, is about the same size as Wales. California and Florida are about the same as the UK. So imagine we had a European country that was this big, that was the size of Germany, France, Benelux, most of Denmark, the UK, or most of the UK, Ireland, much of Italy, and parts of Spain. That's a big country. And think of all the cultures that exist just in this area in Europe. And similarly, we have a lot of different cultures in America. So when we talk about American culture, it's a difficult thing to talk about because it's like talking about European culture. Sure, it exists in some sense, but in another sense, there are many different cultures inside that can be very different from each other. And so, so we have to keep that in mind when we talk about American culture or something like that. My favorite on this map is Alabama is Switzerland. Alabama and Connecticut make up Switzerland. Yeah, first, those two are very, very different culturally, but there you go. So this is really interesting. And it's something to keep in mind that the United States, it's not really fair to compare the United States to just Denmark or just Ireland or even just Germany, I think you have to think of the United States as almost something as big as the EU. And it's about, the EU is only 100 million people bigger than the US only. All right, so let's look at another map that also shows the size of the United States. So this is comparing US states to entire countries by the GDP. Now GDP is, that's in English, the gross national product, Deutsch Großinlandsprodukte, oder Produkt. And this is, and you can see here, it's really interesting, right? The UK has about the same size economy as California. And Denmark has about the same sized economy as Arizona. Texas and Canada are about the same. Florida and Mexico, New York and South Korea, and so on. So if you can imagine all these countries put into one, that's a really big country. And that's a lot to manage if you're the United States government. And that's why in American government, we have a very strong sense of what we call federalism, which means, which of course you have in Germany as well, meaning that the national government has control over some things, but then individual states have a lot of self-determination, a lot of independent control over what happens in their own state. And that's an important part of the United States, that we can have these differences in each state and still be united. At least that's the goal. Here, if we look at the population of the United States, you can see that the population centers, these high mountains on the map here, are mostly in the east, especially on the coast. You can see New York City is very big, and then on the west coast, California and so on. So out in the west, in the central area, you can see it's very flat. There aren't that many people there. And so another way to look at it is like this. If we make the states big according to their population, then you can see California is really big still. But Texas is maybe not as big as, it's still big, but not quite as big compared to California. Florida's quite big. And then we can see New York and New Jersey, Massachusetts and Connecticut are all really big out here. But then these states in the West, like Utah, Wyoming here, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, are just little tiny states when we look at it by population. So that's also an important thing to consider, is that we have certain population centers in the United States. And you can divide the United States into basically 4 different regions. We talk about, and you hear Americans talk about these different regions very often. So we can talk about the South, and it's usually these states. These states are the cultural and geographical South, we say. The Northeast includes New York and New Jersey, Pennsylvania, but also New England, which is the states on the farthest east here. That's New England. The Midwest that's these states up here in the kind of the central part of the country, but also north, and it includes Chicago here, and Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and then we have the West, and that's my region out here in Utah, but also California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and so on, Colorado, Washington. So those are the 4 basic regions, but you could break it down even more into a map like this. And there are many different maps and many different ways to look at the United States. And again, this is to show you that we have many different, because we have many different regions, because we have many different parts of the United States, there are different cultures. There are different dialects even. In fact, if you're from New York, then in New York, they don't say office, they say office. And they don't say coffee, they say coffee. So you can have your coffee and your office, right? And of course, in the South, they all talk like Forrest Gump. And it's kind of funny to hear them talk sometimes, but we really like it. It's really nice. Well, some people like it, other people don't. So now, of course, there are different Southern accents in the South as well. And then, in the Midwest, they also have a very funny way of talking, and they have little phrases that they like to say. I had a teacher once she was from Michigan, and whenever something was very happy for her, she would say, "Oh, hot dog, hot dog." So that's a very sort of Midwest way of talking, don't you know? All right, okay. So people there would laugh at me if they heard me talking like them. So because I'm not from there. But anyway, so that's it's really interesting. You have all these different places with different cultures and little dialects. Now here's another interesting map. Now everybody in America, or almost everybody, we should say, almost everybody in America has an immigrant in their ancestry. So ancestry is your forefathers, the people that came before you, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, and so on. So all of America came from somewhere. And so very often it's interesting for us to know where we came from. We want to know this, and many people do a lot of research to find where their ancestors came from. And what's interesting here is you can see that if we look at the most common self-identified ancestry, it's German across much of the United States. And so that's something important to keep in mind, that German culture, German identity has been a part of the United States for quite a long time, and it is an important part of the United States. In fact, you can see the only states with predominantly English ancestry are Utah, Idaho, and Maine, funny enough. So I don't know why Kentucky and Tennessee say United States. I think that's because they just don't know anymore. And so they're like, I don't know, United States. That's where my ancestors are from. But in many of these other states, you have these German roots. So that's really important. Now, so my father's side of the family is Utah. So they've been in Utah for a very long time. So my father's side of the family is very English. My mother's side of the family comes from Seattle, Washington. And her side of the family is especially my grandmother side is German. So when I look at my own ancestors, this is what I see. These are some of the immigrants in my own ancestry. So you can see this is my great-great-grandfather, Johann Friedrich Boden, born in Berlin in 1870. He's got his, I don't know if that's whiskey, I don't know what that is, and his cigar. It's really funny, but he looks just like my Uncle Bob. Isn't that great? It's really fun to see these old pictures. And then my great-great-great-grandfather, John Rex Winder, was born in England in the 1820s, and he came over in the 1850s to Utah to settle. And here he is in uniform, and he looks a lot like one of my uncles as well. And then here's another great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, Carl Edward Hellman, and he was born in Vasa, Finland, and also came over as a young man to the United States. So this idea of multiculturalism, of different people coming together, is such an important part of American identity. And so it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says, or even what a lot of other people, what the media sometimes pushes. I think most Americans are very, very open to other cultures and immigration and things like that. Of course, with its limits, but it's something to keep in mind. Yeah, in fact, okay, so Johann Boden, in the previous picture, that's him here with his wife, Else Schumacher. They got married in North Dakota, where they first settled in America. And this is Else Schumacher, as a very old woman with this is 5 generations. So this is my oldest sister, Amy, my grandmother, my mother, and my great-grandmother. And so this is my mother's 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 mother is German, completely German. So this German heritage is an important part of me. And you will find similar things to this with many Americans. It might be Mexican, it could be Chinese, it could be English, Swedish, but you'll find that many, many Americans still have some sort of connection or connection to their ancestors and where they came from. So keeping this map in mind, you might ask, well, what parts of German culture are in America? And one answer to that would be, we have actually a lot of words from German that we use in English. Now, some of these you know, some of these are easy, you know them, but others might be new. So I want to look at some of the German words that we in America, or in English, often in the UK as well, have borrowed and we use in our everyday language. So of course, everyone knows this one. In English, we say kindergarten. So that's part of our school system. We have kindergarten, then first grade, second grade, and so on. So it's a great word. And I'm not sure where it came from or who started using it, but it's a word that every English speaker knows. Here's another word, kitsch. Yeah, so everybody knows the word kitsch, and kitschy is the adjective. So there you go, Michael Jackson and his monkey. Dreck. Yeah, we talk about dreck sometimes, you can say. Usually this is not physical dreck, but it's like, like if there's, more like if there's a movie with a lot of swearing or something, somebody's mother might say, oh, that movie has a lot of dreck. It's a very dirty movie or something like that. Now, a lot of these German words come through the German immigrants, and some of these words come through the Yiddish, and these are, of course, the Jewish immigrants that came over from parts of Germany, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarus, and so on. And they all spoke Yiddish, which of course has many, many German words. And dreck actually, I think, comes through that Yiddish background. So that's really cool. Umlaut, that's right. The word for umlaut in English is umlaut. Isn't that easy? It's great. So you don't need any special word. Of course, in English, we don't really have umlauts, but we might see them in German and other languages. So we call them umlauts. And yeah. Kaputt. Oh, my car is kaputt. Did you know that this is an English word? It is. And usually it's spelled with 1 T. So yeah, I can say, oh, my car, my slug bug. That's what this is here in the picture. That's the colloquial word. Slug bug is kaputt. Or you can say, I'm kaputt. Oh, I've had a long day on Zoom. I am kaputt. Yeah. So every English speaker knows this word. Schadenfreude. So Germans are very good at coming up with these big, long words to describe a concept. And so in English, we just borrow these words completely. So Schadenfreude is Schadenfreude. Gesundheit, but only when you sneeze. So if somebody sneezes, then you can say to them in English, Gesundheit. And everybody knows what that means. Now they maybe don't know that it means health in German, but they know that that's something that you say after you sneeze. It's very common to hear people say, English speakers say Gesundheit after you sneeze. Isn't that crazy? Of course, you can also say bless you. That's the English version, but yeah, Gesundheit also. Doppelgänger. So here we go. That's another word. Usually we do not include the umlauts when we import our German words, but you might have the umlauts, maybe not. But very often it's just written like this, doppelganger. And so here's some fun doppelgangers, famous people. This is actually a really fun Google search. If you, I spent a lot of time on this. I typed in doppelganger and I saw this list of celebrities and their historical doppelgangers. So if you want a good time, you can Google that. Zeitgeist, a lot of these kind of philosophical words we have imported also from German. Of course, the food. Muesli is muesli, right? Wiener Schnitzel is Wiener Schnitzel. Bratwurst is bratwursts. In fact, we make that short sometime and we say, hey, I'm cooking up some brats. Would you like a brat? But bratwursts are specifically like these, like the Thüringer bratwurst. It's like the thick, big bratwurst. And of course, sauerkraut, very tasty. I'm getting hungry. And then some of these traditional clothes. So lederhosen, dirndl, but even the word rucksack. We say not rucksack, we don't say rucksack, we say rucksack. But we can also say backpack. So I grew up saying backpack, but sometimes you will hear the word rucksack. Now you have to say lederhosen, because if you say to somebody in English, like, yes, I went to a party in Germany and I wore my leather pants. And I've had Germans say this to me before. It just sounds like you went to like a 50 Shades of Grey party or something like that. So just say lederhosen, don't say leather pants. All right. Okay, but then we have some words that we have imported from German, and then we've changed their meaning a little bit. So a little bit like how Germans have borrowed some English words and changed their meaning, like Handy, right? Handy doesn't mean mobile phone in English, it means like nützlich or praktisch or something, if I say handy in English. So here are some German words that have a slightly different meaning in English. So Wanderlust, or in English we'll say Wanderlust, is usually what you would call in German Fernweh. So if I say, watching the documentary about Africa really gave me Wanderlust, right? It's this idea of, I want to go out and travel. So es hat nichts mit Wandern zu tun, eigentlich. Eher mit Reisen. Okay. Fußball, so we spell it F-O-O-S. Fußball comes from Fußball, but it's in German, that's the Kickertisch, right? So I can say, yeah, we bought a Fußball table for our basement. So that is called Fußball. Then there's the dog, Dachshund. So that's in the German Dachel, right? The Dachshund is also known as the Wiener dog because it looks like a Wiener hot dog. Oh. All right, Flak. So this would be in German like Kritik, and it comes from the word Flakfeuer. And I think it's from the Flugabwehrkanone. I think that's where the word comes from. So we use this colloquially to say, to get like resistance or criticism from people. So the boss got a lot of flack for scheduling a meeting during lunchtime. Never schedule a meeting during lunchtime. You will get a lot of flack from your employees. All right, so they will say boo. Nix, so we write it with an X here. And we usually use it as a verb. So this would be in German something like ausstreichen or absagen. So we had to nix our plans due to the coronavirus. Very sad. So again, this is colloquial. This is not like, this is kind of everyday English. It's not really, it's umgangssprachlich. It's not really something that we would use in a very formal setting. But we use it, and you will hear it sometimes. To nix plans, to nix, to cross something out of a list or something like that. All right. Uber. So we like this German word so much, we named a car company or a rideshare company after it. Again, it's usually without the umlauts here. And in German, it would be something like mega or extrem. So our teacher this year is uber strict about punctuality. He is uber strict, meaning like mega strict oder streng oder mega oder extrem streng. Yeah, so that's something that you might hear. Again, this is more colloquial, umgangssprachlich, but it's common enough in English. All right, so here's that list again. And in fact, this list and all of these different visual slides and things, you will have a chance to, I will give you a link at the end of this, or an email address at the end of this presentation, where you can ask for a PDF copy of all of these lists and different things. And of course, this video will be on YouTube later, so you will have the chance to watch it again if you would like. So that's our little list. Of course, this list goes much longer. You can, both lists you could make very long, but we don't have time for that. But these were just some of the, I think, some important words or interesting words that I thought would be good here. All right, now let's take a closer look at some American cultural themes, and we'll do that by looking at an American. This is the typical American, right? All Americans look like this, right? Okay, no, of course not. And we have to keep that in mind, that a lot, when we talk about American culture, very often we're talking about stereotypes. And stereotypes usually have a kernel of truth. And then, I mean, there are cowboys in America, for example, but it's not universal necessarily. And so when we look at American culture, it's easiest to look at it when we compare it with German culture. And of course, this is what every German looks like, of course, right? Everybody has their lederhosen, not their leather pants, their lederhosen and their beer, right? Now, again, so this is to remind us that these things are stereotypes, that we will look at things that are general, not specific. So let's look at them side by side, Germans and Americans. So this is like a little quiz. So first of all, we have formality and informality. So who has more the tendency towards informality and who has more the tendency towards formality? What do you think? I think most of you would agree. It looks something like this. Americans tend to be more informal. Germans tend to be more formal. This is I think, one of the bigger differences between German culture and American culture. So in German culture, you have du and sie, and Herr Müller and Frau Schmidt, and so on. And in America, we have our formal moments, but we really don't like it very much. So we tend to go towards informality as quickly as possible in most settings. And you will see that as you write your emails to your American colleagues or clients, that you will say, "Dear Mr. Smith, I hope that and you write your email, and then you receive a response and it says, 'Hello, Catherine, thank you for your email.'" And you think, "Oh, wow, we're already on first name basis. I'm Catherine and he's Dave. And okay." So I'm sure some of you have seen that already, that we move very quickly to the first name. We don't like Mr. and Miss very much. So the question is, when should we be formal in America? So let's take a look at that. So we use formal language in American English, and really this is for British English too, you could say, for the most part, in very official settings. So like a formal conference and things like that. I've left that open there. So if you have a formal conference or very, very highly important business meeting or something like that, use formal language with police officers, government agents, dignitaries, so Würdenträger, and so on. So if you're driving your car down the highway in America and a police officer stops you, then don't call him Dave. You'd say, officer, you call him Officer Smith, right? "Oh, Officer Smith, Thank you. I didn't know I was speeding, officer. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. Right. With seniors, of course, you always have to be careful that with that. But yeah, we want to treat our seniors with respect. So it's good to use formal language with seniors, and with complete strangers on the street or something. You know, usually you don't know their name anyway, but you would say, "Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. You dropped your umbrella." I wouldn't just say, "Hey, dude," right? You'd say, "Excuse me, sir." And then honestly, if you're not sure, should I be formal or informal? It's better to be formal. And then the other person can say, "Oh, please don't call me Mr. Smith, call me Dave." Or the joke is they'll say, "Ah, Mr. Smith is my father. Call me Dave." You know? So if you're not sure, you can use formal language, and that's okay. So what is formal language in American English? Well, for a man, of course, you would say Mr. And if you're writing an email, same thing, Mr. Smith. Now, for a married woman has a Mr., you can see, and that's Mrs. So if you're talking to or writing to a married woman and you know she's married, you want Mrs. Now, the little period, the dot after Mrs. and Mr., that's very typical in American English when you're writing. In British English, they often leave that dot out. That period is not as much in British English, but in American English, we always have it. Mr. and Mrs. with the dot. And then Ms. is what we say for a woman that is unmarried, or if we just don't know. So that's the safe one. So if you're writing an email to a woman and you don't know if she's married, which is usually the case, because especially in today's world, we just don't know, use MS, Ms. And so you can say, yeah, dear Ms. Johansson or something like that. All right. Then if you are talking to somebody, you can use sir for men. So for example, you can say, yes, sir, no, sir, or excuse me, sir. And that's very polite. This is especially true in the South. So remember, we had that map of America, and the South is like those southeastern states, and they are very polite generally in those states. So you know the kids are taught to even speak to their father and mother by saying yes sir, no sir, or yes ma'am and no ma'am. So now for women, it gets a little bit trickier. So for now, really, it's for young women, but of course, I think you just have. It's better to make young women as old as possible, you know, or let that group of young women be as big as possible. So for women under 60 or so, use miss. So I would say, excuse me, miss. Now here, I would not say yes, miss, or no, miss. That's a bit strange. But if you need to get a woman's attention and she's younger, that she's not, she's younger than 60 or so, then you can say, excuse me, miss. Excuse me, miss, you dropped your umbrella. Use miss. Now, for older women and for women in authority, so this would be your police officer, government agent, and so on, you would say ma'am. So you would say, excuse me, ma'am, and yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am. But if you're a woman, yeah, you have to be careful with this, because if a woman is younger, or yeah, how do I say this diplomatically? She doesn't like this. This makes a woman feel older sometimes, just so you know. But like I say, with a woman in authority, it's always fine. So even a younger police officer, you could still say ma'am, and that's okay, because she's in a role of authority. So that's okay. So miss and ma'am. So there you go. Now, so then we have how are you? And we'll talk about what how are you means in just a moment. But you hear how are you a lot in English. And it's actually something that we say informal as a formal greeting to people. We can say, oh, hi, hello, how are you? And that's fine to say in formal language. Now you could also say how you doing or how's it going, but those are informal. So don't use those for for formal English. Now, if you want to be very formal, you can say, how do you do? But this is like when you have dinner with the Queen, which we don't have in America. So, yeah, so it's how do you do? And the answer to how do you do is how do you do? So this is an answer. This is a question that is answered by a question. But that's only how do you do. If somebody asks, how are you? Then you should answer, oh, fine, thanks. Or great, thanks. Something like that. But how do you do? No answer, just ask, how do you do in return? That's a little bit funny. But there you go. And then another part of formal language is just to be very, very polite and soft in our speech. So we would use words like would, like would you like to join me for lunch or something like that? Or could I ask what the problem is, officer? Or may I ask what the problem is, officer? Something like that. So these modal verbs, we call them, would, could, may, very, very polite, very good to use in formal English. So that's a little bit about formality in American English. But don't overdo it. You don't want to sound like a butler. You don't want to say, I beg your pardon, sir, would you be so kind as to allow me to offer you a cup of tea? I would be much obliged, right? Really don't overdo it. You want to keep it simple. You don't need to sound like a butler. So sometimes I hear Germans thinking, oh, I have to be extra polite in English because Germans can be very direct. You should be polite, but yeah, don't overdo it. So nicht übertreiben. Okay, so next one we have is friendliness. Now, I have to say, Germans are very friendly, but Americans really put friendliness as one of the top values. And this is very important when dealing with Americans. You have to keep this in mind, that we really, really appreciate, we really like friendliness. So we'll put it there. Americans heart friendliness. We love it. So here's where we have this, how are you? Now, I know some Germans come to America and they hear, hey, how are you? How are you? And then they come back to Germany and they say, ja, die ganzen Amerikaner, die haben mich gefragt, die haben immer, how are you gesagt, aber es hat sie überhaupt nicht interessiert, wie es mir eigentlich geht. Die sind so oberflächlich. Right? And then you can see it that way. That's fine. It's true. We don't want an answer. We don't really want to know how you are. So that's one way to look at it. But the other way to look at it is, this is how we say hello. Because in German, you can say Guten Tag, Grüß Gott, Grüezi, Moin Moin, Habe die Ehre. You have these different ways to say hello in German. And in English, we just have hi or hello. And it's just not enough. We just want something more. And we want to show from the very first moment that we are friendly. That's how important it is. So we say, hi, how are you? Or hi, how are you? And this is, you will hear this everywhere. You go into a shop and the person at the cash register will say, hi, how are you today? And you can just say, fine, thanks, how are you? And that's fine. And again, this is just a way to say hello and to signal, it's a signal to say, I am a friendly person. Also, it's not unusual to talk to a stranger, especially in customer service, and for the stranger to ask you about some personal information. So I remember when I was in the States a few years ago, and I was at the bank, and the bank teller said to me, she was typing on her keyboard, and I was waiting for her, and she said, so have you got big plans for the holidays? And that surprised me, because I was used to the German way, which is, no personal information in this sort of situation. But in America, it's not unusual for somebody in a customer relationship or a client relationship to ask about safe personal information. So plans for the holidays, that would be safe. It would be strange if the bank teller asked me, so tell me about your girlfriend, or, like that would be weird. But to ask about holidays, to ask about, or to say something about, the truck that I'm driving, or, things like this are normal to talk about. And so you will hear that from time to time in America. So talking about safe personal information is another way of exchanging friendliness in American culture. And so you might like this, you might not like this, but it is part of our culture. So if you have to work with Americans as colleagues or as clients or other kinds of partner, another kind of partner, then just keep this in mind. Again, don't overdo it. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to be fake. You don't. But to show a little bit of warmth, a little bit of friendliness feels very important to Americans. And to be positive. That's another idea here, is that we want to be positive. All right. So on the other hand, Germans probably win when we talk about seriousness. Right? Germans can be very serious, and it's not a bad thing, because that means very often we can get down to business in Germany, and it's still very professional. But I would say that seriousness is more important for Germans. In fact, it's not unusual in America to in the professional workplace to have something like a Halloween party, where everybody comes on Halloween dressed up in costume. And so here's some examples of that. Usually it's for smaller companies, or even maybe specific departments in a larger company. It's not universal, but it happens from time to time. I would say in the American workplace tends to be a little bit looser, we want to have more fun. But I'm seeing that more and more in German workplaces as well. So I think that's changing in Germany too. Maybe you've seen that as well. Okay. So directness. And so who prefers directness, and who prefers softening disagreements and criticism more? All right, I think the answer here is pretty clear. Now, Americans like directness too, but only to a certain limit. And I think Germans go beyond that limit sometimes, and that's great. In fact, I think sometimes we like the Germans for that reason. Like, if I know that some Americans who deal with Germans actually really find it very easy to deal with Germans, because the Germans are very direct and they know, okay, this is how it is, and that's easy. But others can be maybe a little bit put off or made uncomfortable if it's too direct, if something is too direct. So if there's a disagreement or a criticism, in America, we usually try to soften it quite a bit. So how do we do that? All right. So if we have to point out that there's a mistake or an error or a problem, to be more direct, we would just say, there's a mistake on page 7 of the report. To make that softer, there are two really good things that we can do. We can use the word seem, and we can use the word might be instead of is, so, or are. So we can say, oh, it seems there might be a mistake on page 7 of the report. So that's a really great way to just make it a little bit softer. Now, if I criticize something and I use the words very bad, right? The food in the cafeteria is very bad. A softer way to do that would be to say it like this. The food in the cafeteria is not the best, right? So we take the opposite of bad, and then we make it the best, not just good, but we make it the best, and then we say not the best. Ooh, the food in the cafeteria is not the best, right? Now, little thing here. Cafeteria is the American English word for Kantine. So if you talk about in a Kantine, in English we say in the cafeteria. Yeah. So there we go. All right. Now, sometimes you need somebody to do something. So very direct would be to say, I need your signature on this contract. Much, much softer is to use this phrase. I was wondering if I could get your signature on this contract. Now, I was wondering hat nichts mit wundern zu tun. Wondering here is more like sich fragen. But even then, that's not what this phrase means. This phrase is just a very soft way to ask somebody for something or about something. So I was wondering if I could ask you a question. I was wondering if you had a chance to finish the report. This is a very, very soft way of speaking. So again, red is not wrong and blue is not right. It's direct and softer. So you have to decide in your situations what is better. But you just have to keep in mind that with Americans, we tend more towards the soft way of speaking. Now, in English, will is a very strong word. Will is the word of promising. So if I ask a question, I can say, well, will you be at the meeting next week? And then I want a very clear answer. Yes, I will. No, I won't. And then that's very binding. That's very concrete. So that might be too direct. So to make it softer, it would be, would you be able to? Right? So this is would, and then be able to is the other way to say can. I could say, could you come to the meeting? But would you be able to come is even softer. That's even nicer. So these are just some strategies that you can use to soften your language a little bit when you speak in English, or to make it more direct if you need to be more direct. So there you go. All right, now let's look at this next one. To value independence, who values independence more and who is more socially oriented? Now this one's, I think, a tricky one, because I think a lot of this actually depends more on whether or not, I think this depends on more on individuals in some ways. But generally as a whole, I would say it goes something like this, that Americans are specifically oriented towards liberty and independence because of our national history, and Germans have been very socially oriented and community oriented. But you see that, but in a way, that's very true of Americans in the big cities and stuff. They're also often very much more socially community oriented. So, as you know, our nation began in 1776 with we had this Declaration of Independence, so the Unabhängigkeitserklärung from England, and then we created this constitution, the Verfassung. And this means that we're the first, that America is really the first nation on earth that was built on an idea. Because until that time, almost every nation on earth is built around language, ethnicity, religion, something like that. But America is built on this idea of personal liberty and democracy and things like that. So it was a very radical experiment, actually, and it's really amazing that it worked, and because it wasn't really sure that it would work out. You know, the French had their own revolution there, and a few years later, and that one didn't work out so well for the French. But the American Revolution and the American experiment not only worked really well, because it's still with us today, but most countries around, or many countries around the world, have used it as a model. And so, that's what's really important for most Americans, or for many Americans, is that we have this that our society, our nation is built around this idea of personal liberty and democracy. That we are the government. It's we the people, and it's not a king, and it's not a family that rules us. And so we have this in our Constitution. We have this idea that all men are created equal, and that the rights that we have as people are not given to us by government, but we have them because we are people, and they're given to us by the Creator. Now, could be creator in the religious sense of a creator, or it can just be, many humanists or even atheists would say it's just by nature of being a creature, or being a thinking person. So so that's this idea, this unique idea, that the rights that we have in America in our Constitution are not given to us. In the Constitution, you can see the Bill of Rights. This is the first part of our Constitution. It does not give the people rights. It tells the government what rights it cannot take away. So you can see the language in the First Amendment at the top. Amendment means Veränderung, but it's basically like the first law. It says Congress shall make no law. And in the second one, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Hallo. Ich bin hier noch in einer Videokonferenz. Können wir heute Nachmittag
Sorry?
oder morgen kurz sprechen? Ja.
Okay, so somebody, oops. Oh, we got it thrown off here. So anyway, so that's an important part of the for most Americans, is this idea that the government there is to serve the people and not the people to serve the government. So we'll skip ahead a little bit here. Okay. So this is another important one to think about. Risk. Who is more risk-oriented and who is more risk-averse? Risk-averse means you want to avoid risks. And I think most people would agree it would look something like this. So I once had a group of students who were engineers, and they told me, these were German engineers, and they told me, you know, the Germans would never have gone to the moon. It's just too dangerous. We would never have gone to the moon. Maybe we would have built a better rocket, but we would never have gone to the moon. It's just too crazy, because it was really crazy. So it was, you know, the Americans had to, you needed some people as crazy as the Americans to do this experiment and go to the moon, because that is not safe. Now, that's not a criticism really of the Germans at all, but it's just to show you that in America, people are much more willing to take on risks. And we also see that in the insurance, the way insurance works in America. So for example, in Germany, you have the personal liability insurance. There's the Haftpflichtversicherung. And most Americans don't even know what that is. They don't really, it's not really something that we have in America. So you can see, so there's a difference there. And I think also Germans are maybe more focused on like the long-term stability and safety of a system or of a company. And Americans are maybe looking more just for the next quarter or the next year. And so that's also something to keep in mind. Again, this is a generalization, but it's something that's true. Okay, so who do you think values holidays and vacations more, Germans or Americans? This might surprise you, actually. I don't know, maybe not. But I would say the Germans. And here's the proof. So this is world productivity. And on the left side here, on this axis, you can see this is the GDP per capita, right? This is how much money a country makes per person. And here on the bottom, we have the annual hours worked. So this is how many hours a person works in that country. So you can see Germany actually works the fewest hours of any country on this list. They only work about 1,300 or 1,400 hours a year. But from those 1,400 hours, they actually make a lot of money relative to some of these other countries. And whereas in America, we work a lot more hours. And okay, the economy is only a little bit better per person, I guess, or the income is a bit higher per person, but we're working a lot more hours to get there. So that's a really interesting thing, and I didn't know that before I saw this, that Germany actually has fewer working hours than most other countries. Now, just a little bit of language here. Urlaub in American English is vacation. In British English, it's holiday. So I went away on holiday. But in America, we say I went on vacation. Feiertag then means holiday in American and British English. So it's a little bit confusing there, but that's how we say it. Here's another thing to keep in mind. Americans there's no law that says that a company has to give you a vacation day. But on average, most companies give vacation days, and it's something like 10 is the average. Whereas in Germany, you have a law that the minimum is 24 paid vacation days. So that's a very big difference. So this separation between work and home is much bigger in Germany than in America, I think. A lot of Americans live to work, and a lot of Germans, some Germans do too, of course, but in Germany it feels a little bit more like we work to live sometimes. All right, now let's get to some politics here, because that's been in the news a lot. So who treats politics as sport? Yeah, unfortunately, we Americans treat politics a lot like a sport. I think it's funny that if I go on the street in America and I ask somebody, what do you think of Donald Trump? Or what do you think of Barack Obama? The answer is usually, oh, he's the worst thing ever. He's Satan, or, oh, he's the best. He's the best president we've ever had, And if I come to Germany and I go on the street and I say, what do you think of Angela Merkel? Most answers are something like, yeah, she's done some good things. She's done some bad things. I don't agree with everything, but it's been okay. And it's very moderate. It's this very nuanced position. So unfortunately, in America, we have these two big parties, and they have the power, and it's hard to break out of that system. And so that's caused us to have some issues. So here's the latest election results. I'm sure you've seen this many times in the last few days on the news. But it's Joe Biden, of course, has won. Not officially yet. The official process will take a few weeks, but there's no question that he will be the next president. And Donald Trump will, he needs to have his little fight, and he's entitled. He has the legal right to challenge in the courts some of these votes, but he has to prove it, and that's going to be very difficult to prove in most of these states that there was a big problem. So he has the right to do that, and that's fine. But when it comes time, he will go, and Joe Biden will be our next president. And so no worries there. But it was very close. Look at this. So Joe Biden had something like 76 million votes, and Donald Trump had something like 71 million votes. So that's like really half the country. It's very, very divided. And we don't have time to go through all these slides, but you can see that more people voted in this election, or a higher percentage voted in this election than any election since the early 1900s. So it's pretty amazing. This is really interesting. All this information you can get later, but this is just a breakdown of who voted for whom in 2016 and 2020. So you can see that Trump actually, let's see, he actually lost a bit of the white, or no, he gained the white. Let's see, no. Yeah, so Trump lost a lot of women no, he gained actually, sorry. But he also gained, so he gained more in a lot of these categories. Like he doubled his share of the black vote. So in 2016, he got 6%, and in this time he got 12%. So a lot of the stories that you hear in the news are not always quite accurate. You need to look at some of the data. So here's what we see when we look at the different counties of America and who they voted for. The red, of course, is for Trump, blue is for Biden. And you can see, here it looks like Trump should win if we look at it like this. But if we look at it by population size, then you can see the big circles are the big counties, they're blue, and then the red ones are are usually much smaller. So it's something like urban America versus rural America. So urban America tends to vote for the Democrats, rural America for the Republicans, and then the suburban America is the battleground. So now there are a lot of complications here. One of the big problems that we have right now is that these two parties are becoming more and more divided than in the past. So in this chart, you can see that in 1994 and 2004, the average Democrat and the average Republican were pretty close together, pretty close in the center. But now in 2017, that center is getting pushed more and more apart. And this is a big problem in America. And this is a big important reason why you should never talk about politics with you have to, no, I shouldn't say never. You should be very, very careful when you talk about politics in America. And also, you can't assume that everybody you're speaking to hates Donald Trump, because it's just not true. You have to keep in mind that for many people, there's this idea of media bias, and that not all of the evil stories about Donald Trump are true, and not all of them are believed by all Americans. And so, a good example of this would be, this is from the Philadelphia Inquirer, same reporter for both stories. And in this one, it says, Melania Trump's Republican National Convention fashion, a scary statement. And she says, it's hard to read here, but she says, because Melania Trump wore white, it's because she's racist. And she wants to send a signal that white is right. But then the Democratic National Convention fashion, Hillary Clinton looked presidential in an all-white pantsuit. So here she says, white is both soft and strong. It's very presidential. And so a lot of Americans see this and they get very upset. And I think that they're not getting the full truth. Or here's another example, of the way that the media shows one president and the way that the media shows another president. Now, maybe that's justified. I'm not going to defend Donald Trump or Barack Obama here, but it just shows you that many Americans feel like the media is trying to tell them one story, and they might feel very differently. And so Donald Trump was somebody who spoke back to the media, who fought for the conservatives in a way that no conservative has before. And so he's become very popular with some people. So be careful if you criticize Trump or Obama or Biden to Americans, because you would be surprised who voted for whom and why. So it's very complicated why we vote for people. So I would say, 76 million people didn't vote for Joe Biden. 76 million people voted against Donald Trump. And that's the truth about American politics, is we don't usually vote for somebody, we vote against the other guy. And so it's sad but true, and it's something to keep in mind. Now, just in case you're interested, this is a really good chart, I think, of showing the media bias in different media outlets in America and in England. So if you're interested in getting a balanced perspective of views, then it's good to look at different news outlets on this list, and not just the center, but also get some from the right, get some from the left, and have a balance. I think that's a really good way to get your news. And it's great for your English. So keep that in mind. Now, unfortunately, we're out of time, or we're running out of time here. So I'll just quickly show you. This was my ballot, so Wahlschein. And so I had the chance to vote in this last election by Briefwahl, but it was email ballot. So you can see the offices for the President of the United States. We actually had 9 people here, including Kanye West. Look at that. And you might say, I've never heard of these other people. And I say, me neither. I haven't heard of them either. So it's because these two big parties have such control over the system that it's hard for any other party or person to break into that. So we have also this, we had state offices and county offices that we had to vote for. And you can see here, state representative. So that would be like the Landtag. District 30, Mike Winder. That's my brother. So my brother is actually, whoops, he is a politician, and he was, he is the current state legislature, so Abgeordnete, in the state of Utah for this District 30. And he ran for re-election, and he won with 57% of the vote. Now he's a Republican. Now keep in mind, Republican, because we just have two parties, there are a lot of different kinds of Republicans and a lot of different kinds of Democrats. So they're not all like each other. Just keep that in mind. So, and here's I think a really good example of that. Even though we have these differences, political differences in America, we can still come together. So my brother wrote this on Instagram and Facebook. He says, I appreciate my good opponent, so Gegner, Robert Birch. So this was the other candidate, who ran a great race and can hold his head high. To hold your head high means you can still be proud and pleased with yourself. I am so grateful that the people of House 30 had two good choices in this legislative race. Robert Birch is a very good man, and I have great respect for the race he ran and all that he does for our community. Karen, that's my brother's wife, and I send our best wishes to Robert and Alice Birch this week. So I think that's a nice, of course he's my brother, so I have to say good things about him, but I just think that's we see on the local level often more friendliness and cooperation than on the national level. And so my brother also wrote this about Joe Biden. He says, congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden. As a Republican, I will be watching very closely to see if you will be true to your word and to be a president for blue states and red states. As an American, I will be praying for your success as you take the helm of our divided nation. When I was mayor of West Valley City, I had several opportunities to meet and interact with then Vice President Biden, and he was always good and gracious. Congrats also to VP-elect Harris. History is made this week. So again, it's not always just battle and fights in American politics. Sometimes we can win or we can lose with grace and dignity. So now I want to go back to the moon for just a second. The US would not have gone to the moon without the Germans. It would not have happened. This would be impossible without those Germans. And of course, the history is complicated, but it was basically these German engineers and scientists who the Americans brought over from Germany after the war, including Werner von Braun here, who basically were the foundation of NASA in many ways. And it was through this German engineering and science that we were able to go to the moon. And so I think, I like to end with this idea that there are good things in American culture that I think are things that everybody can learn from. And there are good things in German culture that I think everybody can learn from. And I think as we try to understand each other better, we can do great things, and we can make up for the weaknesses that we might have in our own culture as well. And so then when we put our strengths together, we can get this amazing thing, like this beautiful view of the earth, that we're all here on one planet. Really, we're all brothers and sisters here. And I, for one, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that I could be American. I love my country, but I'm also so grateful for Germany, and that I have had the opportunity to live here and work here for the last 12 years. And so I really love both countries so much, and their cultures. And it's a great pleasure for me to be able to share this with you. So I hope that you could get something from this. If you're interested in these different maps and slides and English charts, then please consult or please write to Sebastian Fink at arcanum.de. So this is he's the one to talk to about this. And of course, if you're interested in more intercultural training and of course language training of all kinds, please contact us at Arcanum. We love to help you speak and communicate better and better. So yeah. All right. So again, thank you all for being here. And I wish you all the best. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.